Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Surabhyaya Namaha.
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 Mukam karoti vasaram pangum langayate girim yat kripa tamaham bandhe Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Yat kripa tamaham bandhe Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, Chapter 13, entitled The Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Today's text number 31.
10 to 8 till 28 we read.
Okay, we had read up to 28. Yes, okay. So we will do 31, since it has a purport, and we will also read 29 and 30. So text 31. Sadasas Pataya Uchuhu Nara Deveha Bhavato Nagham Thavan Manak Stitam Asti Ekam Praktanam Agham Yad Ihedrik Tvam Aprajaha Sadasas Prataya Uchu Naradeveha Bhavato Nagham Tavan Manak Stitam Astyekam Praktanam Agham Yad Ihedrik Tvam Aprajaha Sadasas Pataya Uchuhu Naradeveha Bhavato Nagham Tavan Manak Stitam Astyekam Praktanam Agham Yad Ihedrik Tvam Aprajaha Sadasas Pataya Uchuhu Naradeveha Bhavato Nagham Tavan Manak Stitam Astyekam Praktanam Agham Yadihedrik Tvam Aprajaha Sadasa Pataya Uchuhu. The head priest said, Naradeva, O king, Iha, in this life, Bhavataha, of you, not, Agham, sinful activity, Tavat, Manak, even very slight, Stitam, situated, Asti, there is, Ekam, one, Praktanam, in the previous birth, Agham, sinful activity,
sinful activity,
yat,
yat,
by which,
iha,
in this life,
in this life,
idrik,
idrik,
like this,
like this,
tvam, you, aprajaha,
aprajaha,
without any son.
without any son.
So before reading the translation to this text 31, we will go back to 29. Maitreya uvacha angodvija vacha srutva yajamana sadurmanaha tat prastum vyas rijad vachum sadasyam tad anugnaya. Translation. Maitreya explained that King Anga, after hearing the statements of the priests, was greatly aggrieved. At that time he took permission from the priests to break his silence and inquired from all the priests who were present in the sacrificial arena. Text 30. Nagaschantya hutadeva nagrinanti grahanniham sadasas patayo bruta kim avadyam maya kritam. Translation. King Anga addressed the priestly order. My dear priests, kindly tell me what offense I have committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares. And translation to text 31 that we have just read, followed by the purport by Srila Prabhupada. The head priest said, O king, in this life we do not find any sinful activity, even within your mind. So you are not in the least offensive. But we can see that in your previous life you performed sinful activities due to which, in spite of your having all qualifications, you have no son. Kindly repeat after me. The head priest said, O king, in this life, we do not find any sinful activity, even within your mind. Very active today. So you are not in the least offensive. But we can see that in your previous life, you performed sinful activities, due to which, in spite of your having all qualifications, you have no son. Purport. They're behind me, or?
There's one behind.
Oh, they're behind.
Communicate.
Okay. Another Bhagavatam class going on.
Translate.
Yeah, translate. Purport. The purpose of marriage is to beget a son. Did anyone know this? The purpose of marrying is to beget a son, because a son is necessary to deliver his father and forefathers from any hellish conditional life in which they may be. Chanaka Pandit therefore says, Putrahinam griham shunyam. Without a son, married life is simply abominable. King Anga was a very pious king in this life, but because of his previous sinful activity, he could not get a son. it is concluded, therefore, that if a person does not get a son, it is due to his past sinful life. Quite a heavy statement. You're doing okay. You have a son and daughter. Yeah. So this is glimpses of the Vedic culture, which is unknown, especially in the Western culture. And just like here, we see how the priest, in answering King Anga, who was perplexed because he considers himself a righteous king. He has called upon qualified brahmanas to perform yajna, following the Vedic injunctions, and and he knows that the brahmanas that he's called upon are qualified. They have chanted properly the mantras, but the expected result, the appearance of demigods, is not there. So upon asking, first we read actually a few seconds ago that he took permission to speak. When we are in front of elders, this is Vedic culture also, one should take permission to speak. Yeah. The Vedic culture gives the highest respect actually to elders, to seniors, especially brahmanas. Brahmanas are considered the elders, and even someone may have, because it does happen occasionally, it used to happen a lot more, even one would take sannyas at a very young age. Even someone is older than him, he should be submissive and very respectful, because seniority in Vedic culture is not based on age, it is based on wisdom, it is based on self-realization. And therefore we see in this whole rendering of the Bhagavatam, of all the different personalities who were present when Parikshit Maharaj retired on the bank of the Ganges, although so many senior, very experienced personalities were present, the the chance to speak was given actually to someone who was very young, Shukadeva Goswami, who was only 16 years of age. But because everyone, in those days, brahmanas, saintly persons, simply by looking at someone, they knew who he was. There's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam also the, I forget the exact word, but something like looking at the biological features. There's a science actually for that. If you just look at the facial features of someone, or how many traits are there, the bodily structure, etc., like that. So here the Brahmanas begin replying to him that actually, as far as we can observe, in this life you're sinless. Even you haven't had any bad thoughts. You have not mentally, sinned. So, I mean, how many of us can say that about somebody? This is the kind of very elevated consciousness that these brahmanas were situated in. They could understand. Not only they could understand his present life, but then they started mentioning that, well, it's due to some sinful activity in previous life. Again, of course, in modern day society, most people or many people don't even believe in a previous life. But this is an integral part of the Vedic understanding, of Vedic culture. The whole concept of what we call reincarnation. So we may be taking birth in a very pious family. We may have received the best of education. We may have received very good training and have developed all kinds of good qualities and good character. But this is something that we naturally tend to forget. The law of karma. We carry karmic reaction, life after life, and it is very something that is very subtle. And it always comes to mind on this topic of karma or karmic reaction. I'm sure you've heard or read the story of Gandhari, isn't it? Because she was, of course, very pious. She was a tapasi, very very much into practicing various kinds of austerities, and she became very powerful also. So powerful that actually she could bless her son Duryodhana to become completely like steel, so that he could conquer his enemies, the Pandavas. But as we know, all of the sons of Dhritarashtra died in the battle of Kurukshetra, and Gandhari was naturally in total despair. She could not understand. She had tremendous. Even a mother loses one son, what to speak of many sons, 100 sons. And she was very much lamenting and could not understand, and therefore she approached Vyasadeva. You've read that story, huh? Yeah, from Mahabharata. And then she began, a little bit like here, she began to explain to Srila Vyasadeva that I've been, in this lifetime, and not only in this lifetime, but in my previous 7 lifetimes, in this lifetime and in my previous 7 lifetimes, I have not committed any sinful activity. I've been very strict in following all the injunctions of Shastra. I've been a responsible mother, and therefore I cannot understand why this is happening to me. And then, of course, Srila Vyasadeva, who is described as Trikalagya, he knows past, present, and future. This was a feature of those who are very qualified brahmanas. So he, after hearing from Gandhari, then he responded, actually, what you say is true, but in the life before that, in your 8th birth, going back, you were a queen. Not a queen, you were a, princess, yeah. You were a princess in a palace, and and every day you would go, and that is a custom. They have like a, what do you call it? Like a small ghat for taking a bath. And one day, as you were walking up the steps, you actually accidentally stepped on the eggs of a snail. And that snail had actually produced 100 eggs, and you killed them all. and that snail rather, therefore feeling great remorse, feeling great pain of having lost all her children. That snail, a little unusual, cursed you. Cursed you that in your 8th birth from now, you would have also 100 sons, and similarly to my losing 100 of my children, you will also lose your 100 children. So the law of karma, Prabhupada explains, is very complex, very severe, and this is what is actually forcing all of us, We're all here. Of course, we're well situated being at SSKBK and, hearing Bhagavatam class. But we're all here in the material world actually because we haven't finished our business in terms of karma. Very few, of course I have no statistics for this, very few members of ISKCON or probably of any religious denomination can say that I have, especially in Kali Yuga, not engaged in any kind of sinful activity, even mentally, what to speak of other lifetimes. So this topic of karma is actually one of the 5 principles that we come to learn or come to know about when we read the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, those who are brought up in that culture, Vedic culture, from birth, they know about the law of karma. But, people outside the Vedic culture, it's a big revelation. I remember in Toronto, quite some years back, one devotee who was from another country, some country in Europe, she was telling how she came to Krishna consciousness, and she was telling that before I was a devotee, of course I was engaged in all kinds of activities, and then it's not until somehow she met a devotee, like all of us at some point, and that devotee explained that actually what you're doing is not right. Most people don't even know that what they're doing is sinful, and so that's why actually at one time also when devotees were discussing with Srila Prabhupada, one devotee was asking, how is it that we are from militia countries, militia background, and here we are, chanting Hare Krishna, getting up in the morning and following the rules and regulations. How is that possible? Whereas, because Prabhupada had explained that he had tried to begin his movement actually in India, but although there's so many pious people, India is a land of piety or the land of dharma, no one was ready to actually fully surrender. And Prabhupada had become a little bit discouraged by that. Then Prabhupada explained that actually in India, people, they know something about dharma. And therefore, when they go against dharma, then that is more serious. But all of you people in the West, you are definitely engaged in sinful activities because you don't know any better, it's not as bad, kind of thing. And therefore, by proper guidance or proper instruction, and by the mercy of the Guru Parampara in the process of chanting the holy name, you can quite quickly, in other words, your sinful activities were in one sense less sinful because you're totally ignorant of the culture. Ignorant, did not even know that it was, somebody had to come and explain why it is sinful. so an important concept in terms of karma, and we come to know, of course, by reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, that the only way to completely put an end to karmic reaction, is by fully, completely engaging in unmotivated and uninterrupted activities of bhakti or devotional service, which we all know is not such an easy thing, but actually that is the standard, and that is what we need to remind ourselves all the time, that actually I must continue this process of coming to that platform where I will not incur or create a karmic reaction, because that is what is binding one to this material world. Interesting comment that Prabhupada is mentioning also in terms of married life. So I know more than half of our population here are brahmacharis. They may be less interested in this fact, but it's important to know that in the very first sentence of the purport, Prabhupada is telling that the purpose of married life is actually to beget a son. In other places, Prabhupada would explain that the purpose of married life is to actually beget children, to give an opportunity for children to be born. In other words, to give an opportunity for living entities to be born in a family of responsible parents, where they will get an opportunity to become devotees, to become Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada was always very, very much praising the children born in the movement in those early days, mentioning, because sometimes he would notice some small boy playing cartels like crazy, Where did he learn that? And then, so, because we have that understanding, okay, he started before, he started practicing this playing of cartels in his previous life. I remember 2 years back when I was visiting, I think it was Philadelphia Temple. One devotee, his son was so small, young boy, had a hard time reaching on both sides of the mridanga, but he had the rhythm, and I saw him maybe a few years after that, and he was really into it. So this is these are acquired, we could say, gifts or qualities that is there, and that is why, as Prabhupada explains, all good activities, especially all activities of devotional service performed by a devotee, it remains a permanent asset, isn't it? So nothing lost, even though we may not complete in this lifetime our Krishna consciousness, we still get the benefit of all of the activities. Of course, we should not use that as an excuse to slow down the process or to not endeavor to actually finish our business. So a son, as we know, because again, it is in the Vedic culture that we hear about the ceremony of Shraddha, and when the parents pass away, when the father passes away, then it is the duty and responsibility of the eldest son to perform Shraddha ceremony. And because no one knows the journey back to the spiritual world, it generally takes many lifetimes for most people. And Prabhupada quotes, of course, Chanakya Pandit, who has, actually when Prabhupada was a young man or a student, this is maybe something you should introduce in Varnasrama College. And actually Varnasrama Colleges, we're all part of Varnasrama College. Prabhupada says actually a temple should not establish a Varnasrama college, a temple should be a Varnasrama college. There's a big difference, an important difference. All temples should actually be centers of learning, isn't it? And this was explained by Srila Prabhupada many times as well, that our ISKCON society is primarily an educational society, isn't it? That means that all of our centers are meant to give an opportunity for educating oneself. So learning when one is younger, and so that's why Prabhupada was quoting Chanakya. I mean, this was the practice, I don't know, 50, 70 years back or so. May still be there in certain places, much less, of course. But just like we learn verses from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, so this is part of the curriculum also, whereby a lot of important instructions are there, like this: Putra hinam diham shunyam. So without a putra, without a son, then a family life is shunyam. Actually means like void, empty, right? Prabhupada translates here as is abominable. Yes. And he ends with the quite strong statement that if a person does not get a son, it is due to his past sinful life. Any questions, comments on this? No, he was just scratching his nose. Yes.
If we see in the present this world, many are locating one child or no child sometimes.
We see that sometimes no child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They advocate that no child or maybe one child.
Oh. So what's the question?
Can you throw some light?
Well, this is demoniac. You see, because the whole purpose of what family life is meant to be is completely forgotten or misunderstood. People want to avoid the responsibility of, when you have children, when you're married, children require a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of attention, resources. You have to provide for the wife and the children. So, and that is why also in marriage life, grihastha, ashram, householder life is the only ashram where sex life is allowed, but because people are totally on the bodily platform, this is the concession that is given in family life, that one can have regulated sense gratification in the form of sex life and other facilities that are there. But it is meant to be regulated, because people don't like the word regulated, because people don't want to regulate their lives and are totally on the bodily platform. Therefore, they have introduced, as we all know, various methods whereby they can just enjoy without having children, or they make these restrictions that you can have only one or two children. So this is totally demoniac. This is totally against the injunctions of Shastra. And I mean, it just shows how very, very far removed we are from what is actually meant to be the standard. The standard we come to know from the Srimad Bhagavatam is that both young boys and young girls get proper training, get proper education, and most young boys and young girls will enter into householder life, although one will be encouraged to remain a brahmachari, if possible, for one's whole life. Whereas the opposite is not true. A young girl will not be encouraged to remain a brahmacharini. As a matter of fact, the injunction in the Shastra is that all girls must be married, isn't it? Why? Because women, by nature, they need to be protected, and they cannot be or should not be independent. Nowadays, people don't like to hear this, especially women, or some women. But we cannot change the Shastras to fit the times. We rather have to change the times to fit the Shastra. And this is, of course, a major topic, which is because it is not properly addressed, let's say, in general society, and even in many ways within our own ISKCON society. Let's maybe just speak about general society, because there are no guidelines and no principles actually followed. Therefore, we have a totally chaotic situation, as Prabhupada described. I mean, when he wrote these purports to the Bhagavatam of Varnasankara, isn't it? Varnasankara means that the society is totally unregulated. I mean, all of you who are here in India cannot imagine, to some extent a little bit, but he's been to the West, he knows a bit more. But anyone who is, and you don't have to go to the West to find out for yourself. Just take the good, feedback that is coming from others. But we cannot, and that's one of the reasons why, because of this total unregulated lifestyle that people are living, in terms of their eating habits, in terms of their relationships between themselves. When there's no regulation, when there is no proper reason, in philosophy it describes how man means humanity, human beings. Man is a rational animal. When he no longer uses his reason, he simply becomes an animal. Animals are simply on the bodily platform, and they're into sense gratification. They cannot be taught to be regulated. And when a human being does not follow the principles of Dharma, then he becomes, or he remains, simply on the animalistic platform. And Prabhupada had very strong statements to that effect. Well, the Shastra for that matter. What is it? Dvipada Pashu. Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animals. Two-legged animals. Normally animals have 4 legs, but in modern day society, Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animals are there. So this is one small example. I mean, you're bringing up this matter of having only one child or 2 children, regulations or government policies. so many of these different policies, including, for example, economic policies, including, for example, abortion, allowing abortion. So many of these policies are just not in line with the actual laws of nature. And therefore, as devotees, we need to understand very clearly these, the difference, we could say, between man-made laws and the eternal laws that are to be found in the Shastra. And what is happening today all over the world, not only in terms of this pandemic that is ongoing, but so many other very disturbing, we could say, irregularities, and even to the point of many of these being life-threatening to humanity, actually. It's come to that point, are simply due to not knowing about Shastra, not knowing about the actual destructive effects that take place when we go against the established laws of nature, isn't it? So this is part of what we are supposed to do as devotees. We're supposed to understand these laws, live according to these laws ourselves, and then try to introduce or explain these to common people so that they can come to know and understand what is the proper way to eat. For example, I mean, eating is one prime example of why so many, to eat non-vegetarian food. All of these different industries are there for slaughtering animals, etc. And so this, some nice quotes I was finding out just a few days ago. Anyways, we don't have time to read them, but Prabhupada was mentioning how all kinds of famines and wars and pestilence, including flu and including epidemics. Prabhupada, I found quotes, that were Prabhupada in his purports in the Bhagavatam explains that these are simply natural reactions, to a large extent actually, of two things. One, in connection with unnecessarily killing animals, right? The slaughtering of cows and other, we cannot imagine what is actually taking place. And secondly, Prabhupada is also explaining that because of our excessive uncontrolled desire for material things, we are using up more energy than we should be. We are not satisfied. This is a very important principle in the Vedic culture. We have not learned to be satisfied with the minimum. It's a very important aspect of the Vedic culture, because when the focus is on self-realization, we learn to automatically minimize our basic necessities. Not that we go around, in some kind of inflicted poverty situation, but we are satisfied with what comes naturally. We're satisfied with what comes naturally, and therefore these principles that even we as devotees are yet to understand, produce only what you need and use only what you produce. It's just like, we'll think about that sometimes, but we've not really meditated on its actual meaning and significance. So Prabhupada points out that this is another reason why, because people are he uses the term the unnecessary necessities of mankind. The people accumulate and consume so many things that actually are not needed, whether it's in terms of clothing or different gadgets or whatever, what to speak of food, and that's why one of the major problems when people in this way go against nature by eating more and especially eating wrong food, then they create this a global problem now. There are many, we have many global problems. So one of the global problems, I don't see anyone having this problem here, but is obesity. And it's a very serious problem in many countries, and this affects the health of an individual, the heart. If someone is overweight and just can't control his eating and is eating bad food, then naturally this causes all kinds of different diseases, which reduces actually the duration of one's life, or at least reduces the quality of one's life and the length of one's life as well. Yeah. So this is only one example of many, whereby when we deviate from what is meant to be the established norm, then we create all kinds of problems and anomalies. We will close here for now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Gaura Pimanande.